Together for Spike Cohen.
Folks, let me ask you something before we get started. Who here is ready to set America free? That's what I'm talking about. Who here is ready to build a future that is not just freer, but safer and healthier and more prosperous than anything we could ever imagine now for future generations? And who here is ready to make sure that we kick those clowns out of office who spent the last year telling you whether or not you're essential, whether or not you're allowed to go outside, whether or not you're allowed to go to a place of worship, whether or not you're allowed to work and provide for your family? Who here is ready to do the hard work that we need to see an America that is as free as we want it to be? Well, that's good, because if not, I would be at the wrong place, and I'd have to find out where I was supposed to show up to speak and figure out what this is. Folks, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having me. We want an America that is free. And frankly, we have seen, not just over the last year, but over our lives, but especially in the last year, we've seen the consequences of tyranny. We've seen the consequences of not truly being free. And it didn't start last year. We didn't need the COVID pandemic to know that government-managed healthcare is a uniquely terrible way to provide healthcare. We didn't need the lockdowns to tell us that government has absolutely no business telling us how to live our lives. We didn't need these ridiculous bailouts to tell us what a mess it is when we allow politicians to have the power of the purse and to rob us blind to pay off themselves and their buddies who put them in office. We didn't need 2020 and now 2021 to tell us that we need liberty. It just drove it home more than ever before. Last year, I ran for vice president with the Libertarian Party. And that's okay for those of you who clap, that's fine. Don't ever let the fact that I'm talking stop you from applauding me, by the way. Just moving forward, if you feel the need to boom, holler, say, you're the best, fight, whatever you need to do, I'm perfectly fine with that. Do not let my voice talking. Thank you. So last year, I went around the country, 35 states in total, over 100 campaign events, met with tens of thousands of people. And by the way, I was able to test negative for COVID the whole time. Turns out you can still live your life and stay safe, by the way. Just a side note there. Again, I talked with people across this country, and I heard some incredibly inspiring stories of people doing their best despite what was being put in front of them and thriving as best as they could. But I also heard some profoundly heartbreaking stories. I heard stories from veterans who signed up and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and the American people from all enemies, foreign and domestic. They were sent overseas and told that they were fighting for our freedoms. Found out once they got there that they were really just fighting to keep themselves alive and the people around them. They stayed there just to protect their buddies, the people that were their loved ones. And when they came home, often on the same plane as their buddies in flag-draped caskets, when they would come home, often with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, chronic health issues, trauma, you name it, they get back here and the promise that they were given was broken. They're subjected to the absolute worst form of healthcare in this country, the Veterans Administration, which coincidentally happens to be the most government-managed form of healthcare in this country as well. They were subjected to the worst form of healthcare. They were criminalized. Depending on what state they were in, they were told that the most effective medicines were illegal for them to have. And it's why we see those 22 a day that we keep hearing about that are committing suicide. But there's the many more who don't, and they're trying their best. They fought for this country, and they're getting some of the worst treatment. I talked to people who, for whatever reason, ended up with either a pain problem or a trauma issue, and ended up having to take either pain pills or something else. Until eventually the FDA told them, you've reached your lifetime limit, you can't have the drug you need anymore. So they had to resort to getting those drugs illegally, until one day someone said, well, you know what's cheaper and basically the same thing? Heroin. And now they're a heroin addict. Now they're facing things like homelessness.
Now they're facing things like overdose. Now they're facing all the damage that's being done to their body, all because the government wouldn't stay out of their gosh darn business. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say up here, but would stay out of their business, would not allow them to be able to have their own healthcare decisions. And of course, and I'm sure there are people in this room who can attest to this, I don't know how many people who had spent their lives building their small business, building their company, building something that they had fought hard to be able to have, only to be told one day by their state government, yeah, you can't open anymore. You can't do business anymore. It's for safety. It would be unsafe if you were open. Your big box competitor down the road, they get to stay open and everyone has to go to them, but no, you have to close down. And they lost their business. And a few months later, they're getting a check for a few $100, and they hear about the trillions of dollars that are being run up in debt. Paper money that's actually not even paper, just zeros on a ledger to pay off trillions of dollars to the billionaires who put their favorite politicians in office. We saw firsthand what tyranny looks like. By the way, show of hands. A couple weeks ago, we celebrated our independence and freedom. Who here took part in celebrating our independence and freedom? Well, I did. I ate a lot. Keep your hand up. Who here celebrated our independence and freedom in a place where fireworks aren't allowed? Yeah. Who here, keep your hand up if it's still up. Who here celebrated their independence and freedom in a state that at least at some point told you whether or not you were essential and whether or not you were allowed to go outside? I had a lot more hands there. Now put your hand up if you celebrated your independence and freedom in a part of the country where they run up trillions of dollars to pay for endless wars and putting victimless criminals in cages and ruining people's lives and enriching themselves and cronies to put them in office. If you're an American, your hand's supposed to be up right now. Our country was started with the Declaration of Independence, followed by a revolution to secure what was declared in that declaration. And we have a constitution that ostensibly limits our government and tells it what it can and cannot do, mostly what it cannot do, and provides for checks and balances. Now, the founders warned about what would happen if we simply looked at that sheet of paper and said, yeah, it's good enough. It says it's going to protect us. It says it's going to limit government. That should work fine. It warned about what would happen. In short, it warned that the exact thing that is happening now would be happening. Let's be very clear. If the Constitution was doing what it was supposed to be doing, we wouldn't need to be here. There would be no need for a Freedom Fest. Freedom Fest would be every single day that we walked outside in our completely free country. Now, some say that means that the Constitution has failed, but if you read what the founders said, they said what would happen. We all know the Thomas Jefferson quote about the tree of liberty and being refreshed time to time with the blood of peace. Well, Joe Biden doesn't know the quote, but everyone else should remember the quote. He tried his best. We've all heard the quote that the tree of liberty may be refreshed from time to time with the blood of peace from time. It's pretty clear what he's saying here. We're going to have to fight to remain free. And to whatever extent it's been taken from us, we're going to have to fight to get it back. Thomas Jefferson was close to being alone in that. Ben Franklin, in the last day of the Constitutional Convention, and I'm going to paraphrase this, I'm not going to memorize the thing. Ben Franklin said that this government will be good. This works for a period of time. This will give us the government that we need right now. But I fear that if left unchecked, this government will need utter despotism, a worse government than the one that they were replacing. And if you read the Declaration of Independence and look at the things that they were upset about with King George about, why they fought, you read that and go, wow, that sounds like a dream compared to what we're going through now. You want to talk about taxation without representation? There are people who have not even been conceived yet. And when they are born, however many months or years later, they will already be saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that they will have to pay off with interest for the rest of their lives. Not only did they not get a say in it or a vote in it, they were even alive when it happened. If that isn't taxation without representation, I don't know what the hell is. Things matter.
said that the protections afforded us in the Constitution were nothing more than, as he put it, demarcations of parchment. If we don't fight for our freedoms, Samuel Adams, Thomas Paine, almost every single one of the founders has been clear that this isn't about what's written on a sheet of paper. It's about being diligent in our fight for freedom. Even here in South Dakota, one of the most free states in the Union, a state that had no lockdowns. That is something worth applying. No lockdowns. A state that recently, finally, told veterans with PTSD and people suffering from glaucoma and children with epileptic seizures and people that are suffering from chemotherapy-related side effects, they can finally access to an effective and safe treatment, medical cannabis, legally. After overwhelming approval, even here, even in South Dakota, there are still things like civil asset forfeitures where the government's taking from people without even convicting them first. There are things like juvenile rape. In every single state of the union, as free as it may be, there's still some lack of freedom. And it can be tempting often for us to look at, for example, what's happening in Cuba, or what's happening in Hong Kong, or even now what's happening in places like the UK and Australia, where people are being told that they can't hug their loved ones if they don't live in the same house. We can look at those things and pat ourselves on the shoulder and we say, wow, we are much freer than that communist dictatorship. We can do that. But that's what got us here. Seeing that we're free and knowing that we aren't is what got us here. So we know what not to do. We know what got us to the point where it's not the status quo that states didn't tell us whether we could live our lives or not. Where that's an outlier, a rare one-state outlier, that's what got us here. So then what do we do? Well, you've already taken a powerful step towards that. This is where you need to be. Making the connections here and then bringing them back to your community to begin the process of setting people free. Going to your city councils, going to your state legislatures, going to organizations that have a common cause and building coalitions and allies. This is how we do the work to fight back and to be free in our time. Let me be clear, folks. Okay? Again, I will talk for you, okay? Let's be clear, folks. Liberty is going to win. Liberty is winning. It may not seem like it right now. With tens of trillions of dollars in spending, endless wars, seemingly no difference between Republicans and Democrats once they get into office. It might not seem like we're winning. Liberty is winning. The blockchain and cryptocurrency is already making government obsolete on a day-by-day basis. Groups like this, organizations like this, are growing across the country. A record number of Americans are saying that they don't want to vote for the status quo of either party. Liberty is going to win, and when it wins, it will be because of you. There may be times that you look at what's going on right now and think, this is hopeless. We're being outspent. We're being outnumbered. Our ideas aren't even out in the mainstream, much less being debated. I don't know if we can accomplish this, but let me tell you something. Every major movement on this planet that has set people free has always started with a small group of people, sometimes just a small handful of people who looked at all those odds and said, I don't care how outgunned and outmanned and outspent I am. I don't care how bad the odds look. I don't even care the danger I'm in, because the only alternative to fighting until we win, until liberty wins, is to just shrug my shoulders and accept what we're going through. That was unacceptable to them. That is unacceptable to you, and that is why you are here. Like I said, liberty will win, and when it wins, it will be because of you. You will be the people that they talk about. When we talk about statism and tyranny being a thing of the past, a quaint relic that no longer exists, and we are truly living in the freedom that we want, they will talk about you, the remnant, who said, I refuse to stop fighting. And when we win, we will have a freer future than we could ever imagine. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but I'm not here to make marginal changes on the side. I'm not here to make moderate reforms. I am here to set America free. I am here to take to
to work with you to take all that power and freedom and decision-making ability that they stole from you and putting it back in your hands would always damn well belong. Here's what we're here for. We are here for nothing short of a revolution, and we are just getting started. Now who's with me?